That's the hour. We'll be fortunate enough to be joined by a member of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, and we definitely look forward to that. 866 Sirius 866-997-4748. Joining us now, the president of MediaMatters.org, our friend Angelo Carusone. And we're also streaming, folks, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Make it plain. Angelo, how are you, man?
I'm well. How are you?
Just fine. Always good to talk to you, buddy.
Yeah.
So much ground to cover. Let's start this way, because you and I haven't talked since this Sinclair story broke. And what is that all about? Sinclair has been scripting their anchors in the markets where they own stations, right?
That's right. So what they have is, when you do local news, you assume that the people there are just, making the scripts according to what's going on based on the day.
Right.
And that's largely accurate, except that Sinclair owns right now more than 160 stations. They're taking over an additional 40, so it'll bring them over 200. And what they have is they have these things they call must-runs. And so they've been, like you saw in that big video, scripting these sort of promotions which are actually attacking the concept of news itself, basically what Fox News does, right? Saying that everybody else is lying, that the news media is sort of fake. And then they also do a series of these things around with Boris Epstein, who's a former Trump campaign official,
Right.
called terror news alerts. And basically it's like fomenting this idea that Sharia law is coming to your backyard. And they sort of run these packages multiple times a day across all of these stations. So what you think is local news is actually coming directly from the top. And Sinclair has been doing this since it's been around. It's always had an agenda. It's just almost always been isolated to conservative areas. Now, because of this acquisition, they're going to be getting 40-plus stations in what are basically swing communities.
Now, there were some who wouldn't go along with this and got fired, right? And there's some who have taken it to a whole nother level and are facing boycotts, like Jamie Allman.
That's right. I mean, Allman did it because he is, what the Allman situation is very revealing in that the thing about him is in St. Louis, they have, most places, you have like a morning news, afternoon news, and then evening news. On the station in St. Louis, what Sinclair did was get rid of their afternoon news show.
Mm-hmm.
And instead, they replaced it with this Allman guy, who is a local sort of like right-wing talk radio host. And what was interesting about it is that at the time that they did that, there was a little bit of a backlash because if this whole idea about Sinclair sort of being a little bit more aggressive lately was sort of in the atmosphere. And when they did that move, there was some concerns around this guy being portrayed as a news anchor. Essentially, what happened. When that took place, it seemed inevitable that he was going to get into a situation like this, and that's exactly what happened. But imagine it's not just the case that, if you're, say, you expect this of, say, a Sean Hannity, right, or somebody who's branded in an opinion slot. But this guy took over a news program slot, and so was supposed to actually be giving people, like, just straight news. And so it is even more than I think the big conversation is letting on because he was actually being moved into a much more venerated sort of role, and not the kind of thing that you would just expect. So the people who are actually observing this, they've been getting sort of this Allman stuff now for the last few months as actual news.
And he's facing boycotts because he was the one saying that he wanted to ram a hot poker up David Hogg's ass. I mean, that's crazy. Why would somebody say something like that? He said it on television?
So what he did is he does radio programming, and so most of his time is actually spent doing his own show.
I see.
And then these podcasts. These figures as they start to get a little bit more prominence, become like little mini heroes among the the sort of cauldron of like alt-right like podcasts and YouTube channels.
Right.
And so there's just so much activity in this space. That's what happened. He was on basically this like random podcast show, just like the just like Kevin Williamson. In that case, it's the same thing. The guy from the Atlantic. Allman was doing a podcast and said that thing about David Hogg, which is just completely messed up on so many levels.
Yeah, it certainly is. But it looks like the boycotts are making a difference. What's the latest on Laura Ingraham? Isn't she still in some trouble?
She is. I think that one thing that gets lost in the media firestorm over these things is that they look for public statements on these companies.
Right.
So in the first couple of days, companies were giving statements, and something like 16. Right now, I think it's a little over 20 that have actually issued a public statement. It's like, okay, and that's like a pretty big number. But a lot of other companies, they remove their ads, they just don't give a statement, and I think that part gets lost. So you have statements from 22 companies, but you actually have a scenario where she's lost probably 70 to 80% of her advertising base. So you don't have statements from all those companies. You could get them if reporters continue to contact companies that had just been advertising but are no longer there. You would see it. But what happens is companies don't want to be on the hook, so they say put us on Laura Ingraham on our do not run list. And the evidence for that is actually very obvious when you look at the quality of the commercials. I mean, she went from having companies every break that you would know and hear about to her current advertiser is Fix Feet Info. And it is, I'm not joking, it is a product that's actually a video that you go to and you pay this guy who explains to you that there's actually a conspiracy, I'm not joking, a conspiracy to turn people's feet very calloused and dry because big industry and pharmaceutical companies and liberal media don't want you to know about the secrets to keeping your feet smooth. It's basically an advertiser that pays a couple of cents. Those companies overnight that advertise.
Right.
That's what it is. It's that kind of scammy sort of stuff. And so it usually doesn't appear though in in the inventory during prime time. That only happens when you've lost 70 to 80% of your advertisers, and you just don't have any more inventory.
Yeah. That's crazy. 86699 Sirius, Angelo, Carusone with us, folks. What's the latest on our friend Sean Hannity? Love this headline from Simon Malloy at Media Matters. Is Sean Hannity coordinating with the White House? Hannity denies it. Hannity is also a liar.
Oh yeah, no, I burst out laughing when I saw that. That was really funny too. I think that. I think the big thing that's been obvious lately, increasingly so, is that Sean Hannity is, really functioning as Trump's de facto sort of press person. And the important thing there, though, is the coordination side of it. And it's not just the case like in the past that he's like a traditional right-wing media figure that is, supporting the cause, In this case, it's really a two-way street. I mean, he spends weekends in Mar-a-Lago with Trump. They talk multiple times a week. And in exchange for that, Hannity gets up there night after night and does two critical things. One is whataboutism, which is actually a logical fallacy. And what that means is you take the latest scandal of the day, you put it in a box, and then you say, but what about this thing? And so, Trump engages, there's all this concern around malfeasance and potential obstruction of justice, and that becomes the new theme yesterday because of the Comey letters. Sean Hannity does an entire program about Hillary Clinton's obstruction of justice, right? And the idea is that you never actually engage with the topic at hand. You throw this other thing out there, which is not germane at all, and even if it's true, it still would have no bearing on whether or not Trump obstructed justice. It is a propaganda tactic, actually, and he does that, and that is a thing. So that's one piece. And the second thing that he does is really advance the latest cause that Trump feels especially passionate about. So and you notice that it overlaps. On certain days, Trump will actually promote Sean Hannity's program, which is what the Post would sort of
Right.
Simon pointed out in his post, is that Trump will actually tell people to tune in and watch that. And that's because what Hannity is going to do is get out there and promote this idea. Whatever it is, it's going to distract, just like he did with the Seth Rich conspiracy theory. The whole thing around that, when he did that last year, it was in coordination with the White House. And the strategy behind it was to take away some of the attention from the release of the original Comey letters. And the reason where the coordination piece comes in is because they're communicating. Trump is promoting his programming on certain nights, and the media term for this is called lead steer. And this is actually something that Trump doesn't get any real credit for, but has probably been the most effective at throughout his entire career.
Lead steer.
Lead steer. And the concept of it is that what you do is you find an individual in the media space who can function as a lead steer for an idea. And the theory is that the news media functions very much the way that herding animals do, that they will move in packs and they herd, and that the way that you actually can have mass influence on the conversation is by finding one reporter, one outlet, one person to drive a new idea into the ethos, and then others will follow by extension. And you saw that time and again. So he not by himself with his Twitter account, but more importantly, when it was really insidious stuff, having the National Enquirer run those hit pieces on Ted Cruz, right? And the whole idea is you get other people talking about it, but you have to find one entity that has just enough clout or just enough of or sufficiently sized platform to really get enough attention for it to kickstart that conversation, that others will follow. And it doesn't mean that they're repeating the lies. It doesn't matter. The whole idea is that you're shifting the overall subject matter of the conversation. They don't have to be giving it your frame. They just have to be talking about the underlying topic that you want them to talk about. And Hannity really does function as Donald Trump's lead steer. And he actually really has two. His lead steer is during the week, it's Sean Hannity, and on weekends, it's Jeanine Pirro. And because it's the other show that he promotes as well, and it's usually the first time that the administration has a chance to respond to, a Friday news dump or something like that. But that's where the Hannity stuff sort of comes in, is that his role is to actually function not just as somebody that's helping deflect and distract, but more importantly, to really be Donald Trump's lead steer, a role that Sarah Huckabee Sanders does not play.
But now, at one time, Angelo Carusone with us, folks, 24 minutes past the hour, 866-99-SIRIUS. Quick calls, please. At one time, though, wasn't Hannity losing advertisers himself?
Yeah, and he has. His advertising base has completely declined. But even before the Laura Ingraham stuff, Fox News' advertising revenue declined 20% because of all of the advertisers that Hannity had lost. I mean, that's the thing about this. It's just like with Glenn Beck. Fox News is not only – and this really does expose Fox News for what it is that here you have a massive company, not a charity, not a cause, not a political campaign, a company that has an obligation to its shareholders to make money, losing money. We're not talking about just a couple bucks. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars in advertising revenue. And they absorb it. They eat it because they don't really care about the fact that they're losing money, because what they really care about is advancing a political cause and an agenda. And just like with the Glenn Beck work, when Glenn Beck had lost his advertisers, Fox News was losing revenue. We went back and did a study. We showed how much money they were losing. Because remember, it's not just that advertisers stop advertising on the show. Fox News actually cuts the number of paid commercials during these programs. The number of paid advertisements on Laura Ingram's program is 50% less than what it was the week before the David Hogg situation blew up. So not only do the advertiser rates go down, but the actual number of commercials goes down as well. I mean, and same thing with Hannity. Advertiser rates go down, companies would advertise on the program, number of paid commercials goes down as well. And Fox News absorbs these losses in order to advance and continue to advance a particular cause. And Rupert Murdoch himself just like he did with Glenn Beck, actually, got involved. He's sort of recovering right now from an injury, so he's been a little bit out of pocket. But even he got involved in the few days after Laura Ingram's the first blow up over Laura Ingram. Fox News hadn't defended her yet publicly. They hadn't said anything, and he got out there and said Fox was being too weak, and he wanted them to issue a strong public statement supporting her. And it's the same thing with Hannity. They eat it and they take it on the chin because it actually their real objective here is to function in this case like a propaganda machine, and that has consequences.
So I have to ask this: how do they make that money up, or is it subsidized from somewhere else?
It is subsidized. That's the part that I think that's why Fox News is able to remain so profitable, even when they lose these advertisers in the way that they do. Most stations, most TV channels will make their money through advertising.
Right.
And so does Fox. But there's this other thing on TV which is called the subscriber fee. And it is the amount of money that the cable company pays the channel for the number of people that the cable company has as customers. So even if you never turn on Fox News or a channel, if it's part of your package, you're actually paying that channel. And Fox News has the highest they're off the charts. So the subscriber fees for Fox News are like $1.30. That is 4 to 7 times more than MSNBC and CNN.
Why is that?
MSNBC gets a couple cents, maybe 30 cents. Fox News gets like $1.20, $1.40.
How is that?
They're honestly they base it. I don't know how they're able to get around antitrust here, but they are very effective at leveraging all of Fox's properties when these negotiations come up with the providers. And it's like, if you don't pay me for this, you don't get sports. Try to turn off sports on your cable package. When they will withhold that, and they will. They've shut down before. When they are engaged in a really tight negotiation, they'll turn off their channels until they get the fees that they want from that company.
Wow.
And so they are very effective at leveraging their whole range of assets when it comes to these negotiations. And look, they have a very rabid audience that will lobby pretty aggressively too when the time comes up. And that gives them a lot of cushion. That means that they could lose almost all of their advertisers. Fox News could lose almost 100% of its advertising revenue everywhere. And they would still probably be just about on par in terms of profitability with some of these other channels because of how high their subscriber fees are. And everybody that has a subscription pays Fox News $1.30, even if you never watch the channel once. And that's because of the way that the cable packages are. They bundle these things up. Yeah. So Fox News is basic cable. That means that it is a part of your bill, even though you never pay for it. When you want a premium channel, if you want HBO, it's like another $10 a month or something like that. Well, you don't really get that choice with Fox News or CNN or MSNBC. They're part of basic cable. That amount is actually factored into your monthly bill. It's just it's not itemized, but you pay them $1.30 even if you never turn it on. Everybody does, and that really is where their major revenue comes from. And it was a strategy that has really enabled them to continue to push in the way that they do, advance their cause with consequences, and still remain profitable. I mean, don't get me wrong, losing hundreds of millions of dollars when you're a big company is a bad thing, and they understand that. Yeah. But they do have a cushion that other channels don't have because of what they've been able to successfully do with these subscriber fees.
And by extension, Angelo Carusone with us, folks, half past the hour. By extension, you mentioned sports, you mentioned subscriber fees, but I'm sure somewhere in that mix, whatever money they're also making on their other entertainment properties, if it's necessary, still helps cover the Fox News channel, just like the way people who own FM and AMs, FM music channels cover AM talks channels.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And that's the other piece about it. The only thing where it becomes an issue, and this is why it takes time. There's always a lag here. So, with the reality is this: the shareholders of News Corp still have recourse, which is that when you are making a decision that is costing the company this amount of money, you have to do one of two things, right? You have to change your decision because you have to give your shareholders more profit. And so if you're doing something that's losing money and you have to switch it up, or you have to tell them. And that's what happened with Glenn Beck. When Glenn Beck was losing money, Rupert Murdoch didn't tell the shareholders when they did their first annual filing. He never, and they must disclose it. They must basically say, look, we're losing some money on this program, and we're likely to continue to lose some more money, but we think overall it is still better for business, but we're just letting you know. You have to report it. It's an SEC obligation.
Okay.
So to do one of those two things. When Rupert Murdoch didn't do that with Glenn Beck, the shareholders sued him. He lost it. They sued him. They have recourse, and he had to pay them damages for decisions that he made as a part of his fiduciary obligations as the chairman and the CEO. And that's a similar thing here, which is that, but it takes time. There's a lag. So in the last cycle, 21st Century Fox did not report the fact that their advertising revenue had declined, that Sean Hannity was having advertiser troubles, that they anticipated these troubles to continue. They never told that to their shareholders. At some point over the next year, I would not be the least bit surprised if you see shareholders stepping in. And when I say shareholders, I don't mean individual people. I mean institutions. Big places that have retirement accounts, manage a lot of money. If you have 1% or 2% of 21st Century Fox stock, that is a lot of money. And if you're not maximizing that return for your investors and doing everything that you can, you're violating your obligations to the people whose money you've taken to invest. So they sort of have to do that. And that's why there's a little bit of a lag. So, I think and the idea on Rupert Murdoch's part, and that's why you see them fighting back so viciously now as opposed to in the past, is that they could ride it out. That at some point liberals and the critics, they will fatigue, and once they fatigue, that they can get their advertisers to come back before the window closes for action for, say, some of these shareholders to step in and take legal recourse against Murdoch for absorbing financial losses in order to advance this agenda. And that's where, I think sometimes these things, they just take time. They take time and persistence. These are big companies, and they can, and to your point, it's not like their cash flow gets affected because they get all this revenue from these sports deals. And so their bottom line remains relatively healthy. It's just that it's not as healthy as it could be, and that's why you have to let it run a little bit longer so that you can exercise another pressure point to really force their hand. And I maintain that it is inevitable that Sean Hannity leaves Fox News. He cannot stay there. He can't. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how much. It doesn't matter if his viewership tripled. He cannot stay at Fox News. It is not sustainable. And you're seeing a similar thing take place with Laura Ingraham, and that's why I think that over time Fox News will be unrecognizable. They'll either be so far off the deep end, and you sort of see a slight indication of this with Fox Nation. They'll either be so far off the deep end, even more extreme than they are now, or they'll be like not a right-wing news channel. Because of the fact that we're in this moment of transition where at some point they're really going to have to make the decision, and the strongest evidence of that is that they're rebirthing Fox Nation, which is their sort of that when Fox News went after Obama for that hip hop barbecue, I don't know if you remember that because he had Jay-Z at the White House, or some of the really crazy stuff that they did, like the Horsemen of the Apocalypse in Cairo and all this sort of, really ridiculous stuff. They're rebirthing that. And they're rebirthing Fox Nation as not a commercial entity. There will be no commercials on Fox Nation. It'll be entirely paid for with subscription. So if you're a Fox viewer, you can give them $10 a month, and you will get a commercial-free, more extreme version of Fox News.
Okay.
Launches in the fall. And so it shows me that they recognize that they are moving into a place that's so unpalatable that they're not going to be able to sustain their business model unless they shift their revenue stream or just become less ridiculous.
Yeah. Not a lot of time left. I got to do this quickly. Just your reaction, Angelo, to Zuckerberg's testimony. It was a little shady to me.
Yeah, I think that sums it up. Look, I think the two big things though that that he's getting off on. And I think, we've sort of talked about these things in the past, but nobody's asked him about the copy of Cambridge's data set. So this entire thing was sparked by this whole Cambridge Analytica flap. And obviously it's revealed deeper problems at Facebook. But the question that I have is that there is a lot of indicia that the Trump campaign has a replica of Cambridge's data set. And that's not a conspiracy. There's a pretty strong case, because Brad Parscale, who was the digital director for Trump in 2016, who's now the campaign manager, he was bragging about it. When they moved to Texas to set up Project Alamo was to integrate three databases: the RNC one, the Trump campaign's text message database, and then Cambridge's database. And you can't integrate databases unless you make a copy. And the Trump campaign today is using what seems like a portion of Cambridge's data set as a part of their existing operations. And so if Facebook is taking action against Cambridge and others, why, number one, did Zuckerberg or nobody really get into this idea that there could be replicas of this, and to talk about the countermeasures that they're taking? And then the other thing is, they really didn't get enough into the idea around around Zuckerberg's willingness to mollify the right wing. And I think yesterday to me was the sharpest contrast of this week. Was it took Glenn Beck, Tucker Carlson, and Laura Ingraham hours, not days, hours, to get a meeting with Zuckerberg and a change in policy back in May of 2016 at Facebook. Hours, because of right-wing backlash. It took the United States Congress weeks to get Zuckerberg to come in there and talk, and has not gotten a policy change.
Yeah.
When Zuckerberg left that hearing, he didn't go back to Facebook and make changes to the way that Facebook operates. When Mark Zuckerberg left his meeting with Laura Ingraham and Glenn Beck and Tucker Carlson, he made changes the next morning at Facebook, changing entire parts of the way the company operated because of the fact that they were complaining that Facebook was censoring conservatives, which they weren't. And so, to me, when you say it's shady, yes, it is. And when you shine a light on that, that's what you see. It's a real sharp contrast. His consistent willingness to mollify the right wing has really helped make things a lot worse.
Have you made a decision yet about whether you're going to delete your Facebook?
I'm not going to delete it. I think that 1 out of every 2 Americans uses their social media feed as their primary source of news. That number is not going to go down, and so I think it's very important. If in the last election cycle, almost 1 out of every 2 people that were identified as left of center was very hesitant to post things related to politics or civic engagement on their feed. The number is only 8% on the conservative side. That means that lies have a clear landing strip, that extremism doesn't have a social cost, and so that's where people go. That's where people get their information, and I think that for me, I want to be able to engage with that. That's how people consume information these days. I want to be able to point something out to somebody when they post something racist or that preys on racial anxieties, and I want to be able to call BS on that people post that are wrong. And I think that's how, in part, that's what's required in the public space. And also, I have an Instagram account, so I don't know if I would delete my Instagram account too. And if I'm not going to delete that, like I see a lot of these people deleting Facebook, but then they're posting on Instagram. I'm like, what are you doing?
It's
Facebook owns
Instagram. It's the same thing.
Lastly,
I think Facebook is a monopoly. I think it needs to be broken up and create a level of competition.
That's fair. I think that's a fair point because of the communications tools that they make. It's a really fair and legitimate consideration. There are different businesses that are there. Their advertising business, their communications business, like their messengers, and then their obviously their social platform, which is their news feed. And there's way more than that. But you're right. To an extent, they really are so big that you could argue that they're a monopoly. And
there's no competition. What the services they provide, there's no competition in the market to provide better privacy and security. And that's why I'm saying that's why we're so dependent on just him. He can get away with the Cambridge Analytica stuff. I got to run, though. I'm sorry. Angelo, you and I can talk for an hour, which we probably need to try to figure out a way to do. Just schedule a whole hour with you because there's so much for us to cover. 20 minutes before the hour. Angelo Carusone, keep up with everything at MediaMatters.org. Angelo and Media Matters doing great, great work. Thank you as always, buddy, okay?
Thank you.
All right. Talk to you next time. Folks, we'll take a quick break.